just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, I thought we were in Bangkok.
David,
I don't know. David, get out of here. Go. Welcome to the webinar. Just when you thought it was safe to be back in the water.
Bangkok, get up, stand up. Critical insights for Thai tourism and hotels. I'm David Johnson. I'm CEO of Delivering Age Communications, and
Bill Burnett from C9 Hotelworks. And today, there's nothing else. The sharks are out there. And what we're doing is saying what is happening right now in the marketplace. I think that's a great thing. Next. Right now, what comes next? Hey, David, going backwards, who do we have speaking today?
We've got some great speakers. In fact, I'm going to move out of the way a little bit. We've got Stefan van den Auwele, who's the Chief Hospitality Group Officer from Asset World Corporation. Thanks very much for joining us, Stefan. We've got Jesper Palmquist. Jesper Palmquist is the Area Director, Asia Pacific of STR. We've got Nick. Jen Siri Ratanakorn, who is who's the Director of Thailand for Horwath. We have Paul Jakraban Ayutia, who is the Executive Vice President, JLL Hotels and Hospitality Group. And we go on, Bill. We've got just such an amazing list today.
Right?
There are more.
Who else?
We have Trevor McKenzie, and Trevor McKenzie is the MD, Coca Mango Tree Restaurants worldwide. We have Peter Weibel, who is the Regional Director, Sales and Marketing of Tour East. And last but very much not least is Charles Blocker, CEO, IC Partners Limited. Thanks, gentlemen, very much for joining us today.
Any notes today, David?
Any particular notes?
What are we doing?
Okay, there's going to be a lot of presentations. There's going to be dialogue. There's going to be interviews, and it's all going to be recorded. So that recording is going to be sent to everyone who is online, who subscribe to the webinar immediately afterwards.
And questions and answers, again, we've got a lot of speakers on. We're carrying a lot of data today. So you send us in some questions. We can get back to you after the session, but we're not going to have time for Q&A today because we got great speakers as well. All guys say, I don't know, we couldn't find any women. I don't know what happened, David.
No, I'm not so sure.
What the hell happened?
In Bangkok, what's happening? Okay, exactly. Who do we have first?
Stefan. Okay.
Stefan. Okay.
Thanks, Stefan. Okay. Hi, Stefan. How are you? Okay, great, Stefan. You're in Europe right now, right? How's the weather?
Hello.
Okay, Stefan. I know you've been traveling, but what's the exact situation for Bangkok hotels? You know, you guys are hotel owners, hotel developers. What's the situation for Bangkok hotels right now?
Well, I think it has been like it has been for the last 2 years. It has affected us quite a lot since the last 2 years. Definitely with the recent wave and the lockdown. We obviously have been dealing very prudently with the situation, and which is very, very unpredictable. So there's a lot of last-minute decisions. So it's really the ultimate crisis management. It's not easy, but I think like everyone, we have to go through with it.
Yeah. I think, how are you managing staff right now? You have work from home processes. You've got the situation with food and beverage outlets closed. Restaurants and bars are issues as well. How do you manage hotels under that situation? Well,
first of all, like many of the owners, and definitely us as the larger owner, we have been very careful in dealing with it. We were the first hotel owner when it started in March last year, 2020, that we applied our work from home approach for our company. And I think the most important thing is to look beyond what is happening now, have a time for reflection, and basically look at how we're going to get better out of this crisis and what are we going to learn from it. We want to get out of this crisis about this happening, about to become as a destination, but also as an owner, as to be stronger. We're looking at a lot at how our operations are functioning, looking where we can become more efficient to see if our products are still relevant for the next generation of travelers. So we cannot change the reality of what's happening around us. We need to be resilient. We need to be perseverant. We're taking care a lot about our staff. I mean, we do see our staff as assets, not as liabilities. And we try to manage within the possibilities of where we are. But we're looking much more beyond what's going to happen. We see now from other destinations where tourism or traveling is picking up very strongly. And when it's going to happen, it's going to be in 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. We don't know. But we need to be resilient. And again, we need to learn from it. I think, as mentioned, what is working, what was working, rather than just doing day after day the same over and over again. How can we be more competitive? how can we be more better as a destination, as owners, looking at Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, New York, London, and say, what can we learn from it? What has worked well for Thailand, and what could we do better? And again, become a more attractive destination. And I think that's where we're focusing very much on that. And for that, we need our teams, we need our staff. That's why we're very committed to keep them in our company.
Okay. You've got a number of branded hotels. How is the working process different between owners and operators during the pandemic? Have the operators been very lenient in terms of, we've got contracts and everything else, but are they offering you any kinds of assistance during this thing? How are you guys working different with operators during the pandemic than you were pre-pandemic?
Of course, there are differences between operators, and having quite a few operators, we can see quite differences between the operators which are proactive. But I must say, based on this crisis, I think it has become even more important to have long-term partnerships and having open dialogues with operators to see how we can work better together. I would say our relation with operators have become stronger and more respectful from definitely since the crisis happened. We know we're in it for the long term. What we also believe, and what we can see already in the last, since the COVID started, there's definitely going to be an acceleration of a trend we have seen already about the brands and the booking patterns that people are applying. Everything is going to be much more online. So being affiliated with some of the larger brands definitely will have we see as a huge advantage. Also because of the COVID and the perception about safety and hygiene, I think the brands have definitely an advantage to maybe independent hotels. So we believe having this long-term partnership, to come back on what you asked, is definitely showing that we're on the right track with our strategy.
Okay. Asset World's also developing a number of new hotel projects. How are you viewing your pipeline? Are you trying to reevaluate perhaps, or you're delaying some projects? What's the way forward in terms of pipeline projects for your group?
Well, we're still having 2 hotels will open later this year. We had a few delays. We have the Courtyard in Phuket City, and we have the Melia in Chiang Mai, which we're opening this year. There was a little bit delay, first of all, because of construction, the restrictions of access to the sites. And as we all know, that some of the construction sites were closed by the government. But at the same time, there's also demand. When is the demand going to pick up? When are the borders going to open? So we try to adjust between supply and demand and what is possible. On the long term, we're still very positive about hospitality in Thailand. Thailand definitely is a leader in hospitality. Again, the Phuket Sandbox is a good example. Phuket is the first destination in Southeast Asia that has opened up. Yes, there has been some challenges, but it has been the first destination that opened with it. So long-term, Thailand is definitely will remain number 1 as a destination for tourism. But again, we have to rethink a little bit about what's working and what can we do better as a destination. How can we become more efficient? How we can become more attractive? And also, what can we do to be more relevant to the future customer? As we know, a lot will change in the industry. The COVID, I don't think, has dramatically changed what is happening already, but it maybe has accelerated a lot of the trends which we saw already. Experience, when people go on holiday, having the right experiences is very important. And definitely the booking channels, how people will be booking in the future, definitely is going to become very important. So for our long-term projects, being Aquatic, being Asiatic, being all the announcements we have made recently, there's no major change except some of the changes that we're facing because of licenses and approvals and normal construction. But we remain very optimistic about the future of Thailand as a destination.
Okay, Stefan, I think we're just about out of time. Thank you so much today. And I think that's great insights from Asset World. It's good to know the projects are still going through. It's good to see people still have confidence in terms of the pipeline. David, thank you, Stefan.
Thank you,
Phil. Stefan, thanks very much. Next up, we have Jesper. Jesper Palmquist.
Big Daddy.
Big data.
Actually, no, Jesper's favorite company, Gojek. Aside from STR, he's a big fan of Gojek. Hey, Jesper.
Okay. I look forward to the insights.
Tell us about Gojek and tell us about big daddy, big data.
Yeah, Gojek. I mean,
Jesper, over to you.
Yeah, what an amazing company. No, absolutely won't talk about that, but I'll talk about a lot of other stuff. Thank you so much for having us, and for everyone for joining from around the world. Even in Norway, I saw. How about that? Listen, I'll frame this very quickly on the Southeast Asian temperature recently. And when you look at this slide, and hopefully you can see it now, someone let me know if you can, we haven't seen much change, right? We haven't seen much change in Southeast Asian markets apart from Indonesia. And what they're doing different in Indonesia generally is that we're seeing people that are ready to vaccinate in hubs. Like, so Jakarta is almost entirely vaccinated 1 dose and 50% double dose. So that's an interesting strategy to get them back. So we're not seeing much activity otherwise. And what I won't talk in these few minutes is about too much on 2019 comparisons and rates, because as you see in this example over on Thailand, when rates drop, they're down. We're not seeing that. We're still talking about restrictions. We're still talking about hopeful coming out and sandbox, and you guys managing cost in your hotels and staff like Stefan was talking about, and then source market. So we're not there yet to really talk about those things, but I have a little bit of a forecast at the end. But we do look, of course, at the new supply that will add pressure. And around various Thai markets, of course, it is a lot of pressure, right? We know that a lot of projects have been abandoned, mostly deferred and delayed, right? You look at Phuket with so much around it. Before the pandemic, that Bangkok pipeline of 15% growth in rooms, we weren't too concerned. We thought that would absorb it, but we're more worried about Phuket and potentially somewhere depending on the airlift. But now it's a totally different story. So all that is kind of changing, and we know that there's just so many delays as well, which crunches it up for now next year for 2022 as well, for sure. The sandbox is on everyone's minds. We're talking about it just before 1st of July. We're 2-3%, no occupancy. Jumps up to 20% pretty quickly. You see the green line. Doesn't impact RevPAR down there so much. We got a good, for once, right? We have for the first time in 16 months, something fun to talk about. 20%, it's hitting there. So what is open? Where is it hitting? Well, if you change that to look at total room inventory, so this is the occupancy rate dropping to 10% when you now include hotels that are closed. So that says us something. Not everyone's open. So that occupancy is 20% for those that are open. So what is open? Well, just before the sandbox, we had about 65% of the keys were open. During the sandbox, now we've seen another few points added, but we're still the number of hotels that are closed. So where do all the sandbox people go? Well, as everywhere throughout the pandemic, luxury and upper upscale is one, especially when it's a resort like this, they get higher occupancy. The dark green line is clearly above with almost 10 points higher. Where in Phuket do they go? Well, if we skip our normal sub-markets and just look, what were the occupancies around the island, right? So you'll see the differences. And this has to do with property as well. So Patong, obviously very popular for in normal trading conditions, going out from international travels. Now it's Laguna, Surin, and Kamala Harris land. I mean, you're seeing those markets getting way more, right? So that's interesting because it depends on what properties are there, right, in these particular areas. And it's also, when you look at this, smaller properties. So less than 75 keys captured way more of the sandbox than others. So high-end, small properties, and around Surin, Kamala Beach. So that's kind of the takeaway from where it was. If we switch over, you're probably familiar with markets like Hua Hin that looks Saturdays, drive to spike and gently just downwards, and somewhere getting some spikes, say Songkran and New Year's. We remember 9 months ago, Hua Hin had 75, 80%. Great weekend, people driving down. That has clearly changed. And we have this bifurcated markets in Thailand where you have Hua Hin there, but then you have Samui, Chiang Mai, Krabi, not getting any of that. Pattaya, just a little bit like Hua Hin. But please notice to the left what has happened to the axis now. We're talking spikes over 20%. Why has this happened? Well, clearly because of dark red zone. Hua Hin now, there's a big change in that, and that limits that straight away. So where do we jump from that? If domestic sandbox is out, if Hua Hin is out, where do people go? They go to outside Bangkok. They go to surrounding Bangkok. They're no longer downtown. So we saw the last 3 weeks when things started to change in restrictions, we see it on a day. It just spikes up straight away. And that speaks to the demand, right? People will take any opening, doesn't matter what it is, and they will go straight away. So 10-point difference straight away in surrounding Bangkok to get a pool villa and or dine out or do something out there where they couldn't in central Bangkok. So let's look ahead. What's on the books for Bangkok? So I took 5 snapshots in time in the last 5 weeks. And the only reason for that, just show you, it's absolutely consistent. In terms of the occupancy rates, wherever we are in time looking at it, it's the same. It's a very short lead time because it's ASQ. That's mostly what it's about in Bangkok. And then it limits down. In terms of pickup and changes, the last 2 weeks, just some cancellations. That's when the purple line goes below 0. All of a sudden, regulations, restrictions, I will cancel, maybe go outside Bangkok, whatever they can do if they can't go to the sandbox anymore either. If we look the long way, if we look further out, 365 days or a year out, you have a little bit around New Year's, but it's not about Bangkok. It's not about Bangkok. It's about the islands, because we know anecdotally, we talk to tourism and travel agencies that say like, no, it's booking for December and January with full cancellation policies, but it's hitting the islands directly and less so in Bangkok. It's too much uncertainty. So when we look at that pickup race, it's absolutely slowing down. See a little bit of a limit there and some cancellations. That leads me to the final point on forecast. How do you forecast Bangkok now? We just updated for Bangkok, and what we did, because of the Delta variant and what's happened, we basically moved these lines slightly to the right and the numbers down. So you see a demand index, which we've kind of kept all along. 24, 25, you see demand. The rates up pretty decent about already in 2023. But the challenge is just when you combine that, we're looking at 23 at the end. So for me, next year, if we can reach, say in Bangkok, 50% occupancy on the full year, next year, I think that's kind of stretching it. It takes longer than you think, and that's where it is. So right now, for me, it's the sandbox, building on that concept, growing it, making sure it works better for the Hua Hin recharge and all the other markets that can do something. Otherwise, get out in the countryside. Enjoy that while you can. And one last point, I just did another webinar where I polled about a couple of thousand people, which market will go first into 2019 levels, Bali or Phuket? Good news for Phuket, 62% on that poll just 2 hours ago voted Phuket over Bali. Maybe that's something. Listen, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everything doing these webinars as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesper.
Thank you, Jesper.
Big Daddy, Big Data, right?
Big Daddy, Big Data.
Yeah, Jesper, can you show us your T-shirt? I want to see your T-shirt. Come on, you put something special on for us as well.
I do.
Stand up.
Now you're talking.
I got a tux. I got it to see.
Beautiful.
He does have a blue blazer, but it's even better. He's got formal. Big Daddy, Big Data. Jesper Palmquist, thanks so much. What's up next?
Next up, we have Nick. We have Nick from Horwath. What's Nick talking about?
Well, exactly. We're in tough times right now. And something when we look back, we're saying, what's the impact of the pandemic? What happens when low occupancy and everything else? You cut costs. And that's going to be a topic Nick is going to cover today, as well as the Bangkok pipeline as well, with a lot of hotels in the pipeline. And what is the situation now for expenses? And also, what's the situation? It was brutal in those days, David.
Brutal in those days. Pretty brutal now, too. Right, Nick.
Sharks as well. Yeah. So, okay. Nick, how are you?
Some hardcore data from Nick coming up.
I'm good. Thank you, Bill. Let me just
okay.
1 second. Okay. So today we'll touch on the 2 hot topics of Bangkok hotel market. So first thing first, let's start with supply. Like it or not, we often hear comments about Bangkok's oversupply situation, and hotels here are among the cheapest in the region. Is that the reality or just an exaggeration? So at the end of this session, hopefully we all would have some answer or better idea on the supply side. First of all, I must say to analyze hotel market supply is almost like a mission impossible task to begin with, as this is an extremely difficult task to find a single source with complete statistics. Based on several sources that we collect data and our market knowledge, it is expected that Bangkok has about 200,000 hotel rooms. And from 2020 to 2025, there will be over 90 hotel openings with additional 20,000 rooms at least. We choose to include 2020 new openings in the pipeline because these projects have not been absorbed by the market due to the pandemic disruption. On top of that, another 14,000 rooms, which is about 36% of the pipeline, are believed to be waiting in line to be operational from 2026 onwards. They are at an early planning stage and include projects on hold and some opportunities that are not officially announced and confirmed, which we label with TBA in the following slide. In the supply pipeline, we have separated rebranding from new build. We should bear in mind that rebranding may or may not have the same impact to market conditions to new build, depending on the amount of work and time spent on the project, the scale, and the strategy. For Bangkok, rebranding accounted for about 20% during 2017 to 19. This is largely driven by the relaunch of Marriott Marquis in 2017 after a long closure for renovation. This is a special case because the hotel has made a very strong comeback with a much enhanced appeal and has quite an impact to the surroundings. However, generally, most brand conversions need relatively short lead time from signing to opening. This means we could possibly expect more rebranding opportunities from 2023 onwards, especially now that more and more hotels will need extra hand and help with sales and distribution efforts to cope with increasing competition during the country reopening. So regarding a supply impact to the overall hotel market, new build hotels during 2020 to 2025 will grow room supply by about 9%, which is not a lot in normal days. However, several related businesses that support the hotel industry, such as airlines, travel intermediaries, tour operators, recreations, will likely need time to recover and rebuild coming out of COVID. This additional supply could present a challenge to a market recovery to a pre-COVID occupancy level at about 80%. And as shown in Jesper's presentation, by 2025, demand could only grow back to the 2019 level without enough time to absorb new supply in the next 5 years. Market occupancy could possibly be diluted. Then on top of that, another layer of new supply beyond 2025 will add more pressure, growing total rooms by 7% more. Not to mention that there could be some unknown projects in the making. And then they are shown as the last gray stripe of the top horizontal bar, presenting some additional pressure and uncertainty. In terms of locations, city center submarkets are the main hotspots through 2025, with Mid-Sukhumvit and the Sathorn Siloam CBD and the Siam Plunge City Core in the top three. Several projects in these areas resulted from redevelopment and repositioning efforts planned several years ago. In comparison, over the past few years up to 2019, both Inner and Mid-Sukhumvit were very popular for new hotel projects, followed by peripheral locations like North Bangkok Airport and the new Ratchada CBD, with available land parcels being developed to ride on a strong market momentum. When we look further into hotel classification, new supply largely comprise upscale hotels and above. However, with the combined existing and new supply, as shown in the rightmost bar, the upscale segment and above still represent a relatively small proportion of around 30% only. To put things into perspective, a market share of high-end products is about 50% in Singapore, which is a high-yielding, aspirational market to many urban hotel destinations in the region. So in short, my response to the previous question about an oversupply situation in Bangkok would be both yes and no. Bangkok's overall average daily rate has been rather stagnant over time. It is fair to say that supply has some impact in some way, in some form, but definitely it is not the only factor. We must not forget that Bangkok has been interrupted many times by many incidents. Besides, the city's hotel market is one, if not the largest, in Southeast Asia, and it is very fragmented. Instead of concluding with a generalization for the whole Bangkok, you should try to understand each individual submarket and or segment to determine whether supply and demand are still staying in balance. Next, let's move on quickly to the second part, which is about 2020 performance in the first year of disruption. The statistics are obtained through our annual survey under collaboration with several hotel groups and associations. We hope that these numbers could serve as another reasonable benchmark for business review and planning, especially in a tough time like this. For Bangkok, 2020 doesn't look good at all when occupancy fell sharply to below 30%. The city was largely dependent on quarantine demand, but didn't quite have the same leisure appeal to the domestic market compared to beach towns like Pattaya and Hua Hin. Further destinations in the south like Phuket were not doing too well either, bringing down the whole Thailand to a 30% occupancy mark for the first time in history. Of the select markets, Bangkok, Phuket, and the overall Thailand recorded operating losses. When we make a year-on-year comparison, Bangkok's total revenues per room decreased by the largest percentage relative to other select markets. Cost cutting isn't sufficient to protect margin, as several Bangkok hotels have large MICE facilities and extensive F&B components. Capturing local consumption was challenging under government restrictions. And what was even harder was managing costs when the rules were fast changing. On the other hand, some resorts decided to extend a closure after the April lockdown in order to conserve high season cash flow to earn in the first quarter. And this sort of helped the performance of a market like Phuket to some extent. Next, I like to show another type of comparison, which is cutting into top-tier hotels across key cities of Southeast Asia. Top-tier hotels refer to properties in the upper upscale segment and above, so-called five-star hotels, and figures are shown in US dollars for apple-to-apple comparison. Most cities, except for Singapore, saw an occupancy fall to 30% or less, which was a major reason for a significant revenue shortfall. Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, and Jakarta witnessed a severe margin erosion and ended up losing money. On the other hand, Singapore, as a regional travel and commercial hub, benefited from quarantine and long stay demand, allowing it to mitigate shortfall in both revenue and profit. More importantly, Singapore hotels acted so quickly in adjusting cost structures, despite being known as a relatively expensive place to run a business. Additionally, for Vietnam, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh hotels were successful in protecting profitability. They generally operate in a low-cost environment, allowing them to sustain the highest GOP margin of all select markets, both before and in the pandemic. So last but not least, it comes down to the hotel management and owners' vision and strategy. Some have an upper hand and are able to keep staff and maintain relationship with suppliers, service providers. Others are bound to deliver financial results, and they have to make tough calls to protect the bottom line. So think carefully of what works for you and your organization and choose the right financial benchmark for your planning. And this is pretty much the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. One quick question. I'm a hotel manager and I'm trying to make a budget for my owner and my chain next year. What's the outlook for next year for the budget?
Wow. What's the outlook for next year? I think it's, first half will still be very uncertain. So it could still be pretty much like this year because, we know that there's a lot of uncertainty in demand recovery. Second half could be some more optimistic, but, it's anyone's best guess at this stage, right? We're just going to have to, keep updating the budget and forecast.
Okay. Yeah. I think one interesting thing we're looking at for hotels is we're almost at the start of a new cycle. And we're saying, if you're going to look at a hotel, you're going to go back into a new cycle. It's going to take 2 or 3 years and you're going to see the same, like a new hotel opening. You'll see the whole pattern, same trajectory. You're going to see expenses go down as revenue comes up, and it's going to be a cycle. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to happen 3 months, 6 months. It's going to be the same process. That's kind of the best way to look at budgets, like opening a new property as well, because we're going pretty much from zero, right? Okay.
Okay.
David?
Yes, a little bit grim out there, but let's look.
The sharks are out.
Let's look to the future and be positive. We've got Paul up next. Paul is the executive vice president of JLL. Paul, are you with us?
Yes, David.
I think, Paul, today you're going to be talking about, again, do you want to buy a hotel, or what's the situation for transactions? It's not week in, week out. I get a call saying I want to buy a cheap hotel. I want to buy a hotel 50% off. I want to take advantage of the pandemic and everything else. What's the situation on the ground in Thailand for hotel owners and for people looking for properties as well. What's the transaction activity looking like as well in terms of reinvestment into hotels? So give us some insight, Paul.
Yes, Bill. I'll bring up the presentation, but in a nutshell, the momentum is back, and we're seeing a relatively normal average year in terms of transaction volume at about 10 to 12 billion baht. So it's good. It's a good bounce back from last year and the year before. And just thank you everyone for signing in. It's a pleasure. I hear the turnout is phenomenal. In terms of hotel investment activity in Thailand, I just wanted to start with the big picture of Thailand, and then coming into Bangkok. As you can see, Bangkok in red here has been a major contributor to Thailand hotel transaction volume over the past decade. And last year, we only recorded 1.9 billion baht of hotel transactions. All of those transactions were agreed pre-pandemic. And it should be noted as well that we don't include related party transactions on this chart. So for example, the sales of Capella, Bangkok, Four Seasons Bangkok, and when the JV partner of Peninsula Hotel bought each other out, we did not include those transactions for the 2020 volume. In terms of 2021, this year, 2.7 billion baht have completed. And on top of that, 3 billion have had their contract exchanged. And we are aware of three other transactions that are under MOU currently. And if all those transactions complete, we should be seeing a volume of around 10 to 12 billion baht and a total of 12 transactions. So a relatively normal year compared to the activity level pre-pandemic. Some of the notable transactions that we saw this year that have completed: Sigma Resort Jomtien Pattaya, Sanyapura Sports and Health Resort in Phuket, the Manatai portfolio where there was one hotel in Samui, one hotel in Phuket, one hotel in Khao Lak, Centara Azure Hotel Pattaya, and Hilton Garden in Phuket Bangtao. And in terms of recategorizing the data so that we can see in terms of the value impacts and how they pan out for each respective market. On the left-hand side, we've divided the data into the number of transactions. So out of the 12 transactions, 6 have completed, 3 have exchanged, and 3 are under MOU. And in terms of value by volume, 38% is showing very little price change, about 0 to 5%. And all of this is in Bangkok, as you will see in the next slide. 24% is showing a discount of around minus 15 to minus 20%. And 38% or 9 deals are seeing 30% or more discounts. On the right-hand side, when you look at the number of assets within these transactions, because some of these transactions are portfolio deals, there are 17 assets. And in terms of their volume, 22% is in Bangkok, 20% Phuket, 43% in Koh Samui. And when you combine the top 3 hotel investment destinations in Thailand, that accounts for about 84%. And the remaining 5 transactions only account for 16%. The other thing that's worth noting is that only one transaction is in excess of 1 billion baht. The rest are below 1 billion. And one of the reasons why this is because some of the assets that we've seen are partial sales. So it's not 100% acquisitions. So the deal sizes are small. But by and large, the deal sizes are small compared to what we were seeing pre-pandemic. In terms of dividing the data into their respective markets to see the value impact, interestingly, on the left-hand side for Bangkok, 100% of the volume has seen very little to price change, 0 to 5%. And on the far right, the destinations outside of the 3 major destinations in Thailand, Bangkok, Phuket, and Samui, are all seeing 30% or more discount. Phuket and Samui are showing mixed pictures. 41% for Phuket, 90% for Samui in terms of little price change. For Samui, 57% in the minus 15 to minus 20% range, and then 59% for Phuket and 24% for Samui that had a deep discount that are 30% or more. This is the pre-pandemic trends that we tracked from 2010 to 2020. And you can see that on the left-hand side, the type of buyers that were very active and their activity were more than 50% were developers, and it was individuals and corporates. Whereas on the right-hand side, in terms of the buyers' nationalities, 60% for Bangkok were domestic buyers, and around 40% were international buyers led by Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan in that order. And not to our surprise, the majority of the hotel sellers were domestic at about 90%. So in terms of the inquiries we've been getting for Bangkok this year, we've seen more activity and inquiries from high net worth individuals, corporates, and private equity funds, and much less inquiries from developers and operators. The core nationality groups haven't really changed. You have domestic investors from Thailand, and in terms of foreign investors, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, China, they're all interested to have something in Bangkok. What has changed in terms of pre and during pandemic is the increased activity from the US and the Middle Eastern investors. The other factor that we would like to highlight is the strong fundamentals that Bangkok has, and the many demand drivers that are being constructed and are being expanded. And these are all big projects that are happening in Bangkok at the moment. For example, Dusit Central Park, Sphere Bangkok, Terminal 21, One Bangkok, Central Embassy, Bangkok Mall. So it really underpins the strong fundamentals of Bangkok. The other one that we've been tracking, and it's a good indicator of hotel owners and investors' confidence, is that the number of rebrands, new builds, and the new developments that have been announced have been ample in Thailand. For example, projects like the Standard, Old Customs House, Intercontinental Bangkok, AMCHAM Bangkok, all of these projects have been announced, and they're all pushing ahead to be ready once COVID is over. So what are the key takeaways for Bangkok and Thailand? Bangkok, we've seen little to no price change, and we feel this is largely due to a high level of hotel capital chasing deals and very little supply of opportunities, even in a market that has a big supply of over 150,000 keys. Nick was just giving us a summary of about 200,000 keys. And despite the little change in value for Bangkok, strategic buyer still see this as a good opportunity because the pandemic has unlocked new opportunities that would have not otherwise been in the market. Phuket and Samui, we're seeing more discounts than Bangkok. But if you look at Bangkok, Phuket, and Samui as three major destinations, you're seeing less discounts in those locations, far less from destinations that are outside of Bangkok, Phuket, and Samui. There's still a small portion of foreign hotel owners in Bangkok, only around 7%. So if you're a Bangkok hotel owner who are considering disposing your Bangkok hotel, one of the key strategies would be to try and tap into as much foreign demand for foreign investors as possible, because historically what we've seen is that they don't have as many hotels in Bangkok and Thailand, and they tend to be hungrier, accepting a lower return, and don't mind paying relatively higher value for the asset. Strong fundamentals, as evidenced by multiple rebrands and new builds, and the various demand generators that are under construction. The price gap, there still is a price gap between buyers and sellers, but this price gap continues to narrow with increasingly more strategic buyers stepping up. The majority of the deals that you saw are still small, with only 6% in terms of volume that is bigger than 1 billion baht. In terms of the various discussions that we're hearing at the moment, next year, we're quite confident that we'll start to see more larger hotel transactions, the 2 billion baht deal, 3 billion baht deal completing next year. Thank you. That would be it for my session. Thank you, Bill and David.
Okay, Paul, we've got a couple questions for you. I want to know more. I got to know more. I mean, We've seen a lot of resort transactions or these kind of markets. Why aren't we seeing more hotels for sale in Bangkok? And do you think that's going to change?
Yeah, the main factor we feel is the profiles of owners in Bangkok. These tend to be big families, big corporations with not only businesses in hotels, but businesses in other areas. And business in other areas are helping the shortfall of the hotel. So, for them, it's a generational asset. It's been in the family for a long time. Unless they have to sell, they will just continue to hold. And secondly, they like the fundamentals of Bangkok. I mean, in terms of the various discussions that we've had, Bangkok has always come out, very, very high compared to other destinations in Thailand in terms of interest from investors and the confidence that it has in the market. I mean, it was the most visited city in the world for 4 consecutive years prior to the pandemic. So I feel these would be the reasons why you don't see as many hotels coming out to the market in Bangkok.
Maybe one more question. I see so many questions. What about debt? I mean, the transactions you're seeing are these cash buyers, are they buying off balance sheet? How important is debt to the hotel transaction process during the pandemic?
Yeah, it is important, and we've heard more and more in terms of the challenge and the struggle for some investors to acquire debt in order to complete the transactions. A lot of the transactions that we've seen are either cash buyer or buyers with very strong credit that they know that the bank would be supportive and lend to them. But you are right, Bill. I mean, we do come across a number of investors where they say that during this time, it's very difficult for them to obtain debt, which lowers the number of participation.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Great presentation. You got a great big living room there as well. How do you get housekeeping in for that? Okay.
This is our new that's our new office in Bangkok. Not my house. Thank you.
Work from home. Okay.
Excellent. Paul, that's just fascinating. And there's been a lot of questions that have come in about that. And we're going to pass them on to you, and we'll get back to people individually because we don't have time to do the questions live at the end of the session.
Thank you, David.
Right.
What's next, David?
Okay. Thank you. Next, we're going to move to restaurants.
Restaurants. What do you know about restaurants?
Well, not a lot.
You know about restaurants. You go to a 7-Eleven. You see that Gojek driver. Thanks, yes, for the Gojek.
Back to delivery. We're actually going to move the conversation on a little bit from delivery.
Okay. I'm going to leave you with that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to move the conversation on a little bit from delivery. We might touch on it, but I'm delighted to welcome Trevor McKenzie to the discussion today. And Trevor is the managing director and partner of Mango Tree Worldwide. Trevor, welcome.
Thank you, David.
So let's just start off. What's the state of play in Bangkok at the moment for restaurants? Here it's pretty ugly out there.
It is, just like everyone else. When you get that close sign, there's no cash flow coming in. So us, like quite a few hotels in Thailand, we relied a lot on tourism and corporate business to fill our restaurants. That's why we did the type of volumes that we did. But without those people here, it's put us in a position where we've had to close several restaurants, 7 exactly. But it's also put us in a position to innovate, where we decided that, hey, we need to be ready for the future. And if this kind of thing is going to be around, then we need to innovate how we move on.
It's very, very difficult to plan the future, isn't it? Because as we've heard from a lot of the panelists today, I mean, the crisis is going to be going well into next year, from what we're hearing about it. And there's different iterations of that crisis. We've got resort destinations, we've got Bangkok, but we're going to focus on Bangkok today. You talked about innovation. What sort of things have you been doing?
So what we've been doing is we've been going out to where the customers are. Traditionally, like I said, we were in the downtown cores. That's where the majority of our restaurants are. With lockdowns and stay at home, we started to see that, our customers were ordering on our delivery platforms, but they would be 30 kilometers away. And so what that did was put us in a position where we opened what we call Coca pop-ups, which are suburban restaurants that we could put in areas right next to housing developments so people don't have to travel far. Very simple concept. Basically, we call it the kitchen for the local residents is what our little motto is that we're there for the people. I think I've even received lots of feedback on our Coca restaurants as well, that people have been going there for years, but it's downtown. Nobody wants to drive in on the weekends, that type of thing. And then we also just started making remote kitchens and these cloud kitchen,
let me just,
ghost kitchen.
Before we talk. Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I'm sorry to cut you off, really sorry. But I'm just fascinated to know a little bit more about Coca. I mean, I've lived in Bangkok for over 25 years and have dined in Coca a lot. And I know Coca is quite the heritage. Coca actually started off as downtown, right? Silom, you were in Silom.
Yeah, Soy Decho was the first restaurant 65 years ago. Yes.
Right. So it's almost as though you're going back to your roots, actually providing kitchens for the community, if you like.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We said we need to go where the people are. I mean, before when we were downtown in Bangkok, we've always been a family-oriented type restaurant group that, focuses on that. So I think where we're moving in that direction with these suburban outlets, I think is the right thing, so people can reach us more often.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you. Again, sorry to cut you off. I mean, we've heard a lot about ghost kitchens, for example. Is this something that your group's looking at?
Yeah, we've actually we've already had a few in operation already. We're about to open our third by the end of the month. And again, this was as a result of seeing the delivery and having to deliver 30 kilometers away to our customers. So we started opening up very simple 50 square meter, 40 square meter. One is going to be a container where we've put kitchens in. We utilize our main outlet downtown as a central kitchen, so we can send stuff to these outlets, and it decreases our delivery time, and we're getting a lot more business as a result. And so I think it's a good add-on to have to the portfolio.
How long does it take to set up these ghost kitchens?
10 days to 20 days maximum. That's what's even awesome or great about it. Yes.
No, that's great. And you're finding so you got the container, which is fascinating. So that's different. But you're looking at renting space and then converting that space, just empty space, warehouse space.
Yeah, very simple space. It doesn't have to be seen. The focus is delivery and the online channels. So it's not where we need people to come and pick it up or anything like that. So we're keeping it simple and following what the people want.
Let me ask you quickly about delivery, and then I'm going to ask you another question. We've got about 3 minutes. Just quickly on delivery, everyone immediately went into the delivery market. That's how a lot of restaurants survive. But do you have any comments to make about that? Because I know your Grabs and your Gojeks maybe not so much. Sorry, yes, but your Grabs and your Pandas. I mean, there's been a lot of your Line Man. I mean, there's been a lot of services for that. Have you found that quickly?
Yeah. I mean, it's the devil you have to deal with in all the markets that we're in. This is one thing. I wish Thailand would fight a bit harder to get the rates reduced, because that's important. Because working on these platforms, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So we're damned if we don't, because we don't get those customers, and when we do, we don't really make that much profit. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, and hopefully over time it gets better. But that's why we focus on our own channel. We've been really pushing our Line official, Facebook, getting deliveries direct, which is making a big difference. Okay, that's great. Hey, so let's just wrap it up by asking you, what's next? I mean, are you able to take any of the examples of what you've done in Bangkok and take to other urban centers? I know you're in a lot of other urban centers around the region, from Beijing to Ho Chi Minh City to KL. Are you taking any of those examples? Manila, for example. I mean, are you developing as a result? Expanding? Actually, Japan is probably a bit ahead of us. We keep having a race to open these suburban centers. Japan's already opened 3. They're doing just as much volume as our downtown outlets, which in 2019. So we're saying this is a great model. We're rolling out our ghost kitchen models for all our franchisees to add to their portfolios. And so we'll see a few of those come up. And what we're doing is we're looking at capitalizing on weak rental market. And so a lot of restaurants have closed around the world, and not only Bangkok, but we're able to take over these restaurants for considerably less and renovate them and turn them into profit centers very quickly. So we're on target. Excellent. I mean, it's also good because we have loyal customers. We've been around for 65 years. People both know Coca and Mango Tree. So when the customers do come back, they come back very quickly. That's why you saw us open 7 restaurants last year, and we're on target to open 17 this year with all the new models we've added to everyone. So it's every crisis there's opportunity. No, it sounds absolutely fantastic. It's a renter's market, and if you're able to leverage brand and leverage customer loyalty, that's excellent. Phil, do you want to come in a sec?
Sorry. Thanks so much. Trevor, great. Actually, you and Charlie both got the memo on the Blue Blazers. David and I'm sorry, we didn't get that. I've got a question for Trevor. I mean, it's just a shitstorm out there for restaurants right now. I mean, sorry to say, Jesus, devastation. If you go back and look at a 20-year-old Trevor, maybe before the Blazer, right? Go backwards and say, 20-year-old restaurateur Trevor, What are you going to say to somebody who's in this business about a future? You know, what's going forward in Bangkok? I want to be a restaurateur. Is there any hope? What do you think you're going to have to do in the future to be a restaurateur in Bangkok and survive, much less prosper?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to work on the experience. I mean, Bangkok for a long time just worked on and still does, you know, that we have these hordes of tourists and corporate, and now we're going to become up from Canada and the North American restaurant market. It is so competitive. So I really see a lot of competition coming up. I also see a lot of innovation because the younger generation is coming into the market and they're accepting things in a different ways. But people need to go out and eat. This is one thing I keep hearing day after day after day. I can't wait to go eat at a restaurant. I can't wait to go eat at a restaurant. So we definitely know that restaurants are not going away.
Great news. Great presentation, Trevor. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
What's next, David?
Thank you. Okay, we have Charles Blocker. Charles.
No. We've got Peter Weivel. No. You've got your.
Excuse me. I've got my schedule.
If you had your blazer on, this wouldn't have happened. Peter Weivel. We're on the tour bus. It was amazing. One of the best things about the Sandbox was I was standing by the side of the road on a tour bus. It was like a surreal moment. I actually saw tourists on a tour bus the other day. I hadn't seen one for 17 months. It was such a, I'm not sure if it was a good site or not, but it was an amazing site. What about the tour groups? Thailand continues, 39 million in terms of 2019. Yeah. What's next?
Let's bring the buses back. I mean, come on.
Bring the buses back. Peter, are you there?
Yes,
Peter Weibel.
I am here. Can you hear me this time?
Okay. Loud and clear, thank you.
Loud and clear.
We can hear you.
Excellent. Anyway, thank you very much for having me. And I'm sorry, my blue blazer is not fitting. Lockdown hair, lockdown fitness. So I work on it, and I will see you in Phuket soon.
Okay,
excellent. So I believe that it would be a good idea to just quickly, let me see that I can you see my screen?
We can. You're on.
Thank you.
Take us there, Peter.
Okay, wonderful. So perhaps not a bad idea to start by giving a quick overview of who we are. Next year's tourist is celebrating our 50th anniversary. The network is present in 18 countries across 7 time zones, and we have been a member of the JTB group since December 2014. We are the global DMC's network inbound brand in Asia Pacific. So, and our source markets spread all over the world. You name it, we have it. As for Thailand, we are represented in every destination, and we are handled leisure, group, MICE business on a B2B basis. Tourist has been a division of JTB Thailand since January 2021. So the consolidation has taken place late last year. It already took place in other countries in 2019. And this gives you an idea of the business volume that both brands had in the good old days of 2019. And then traveling became more difficult and airports got very quiet. We started first by helping tourists who were stranded here in Thailand to get back home. And then April was the beginning of the work from home scheme. We have also since then been split in teams with alternate working days from home and the office. Most of the movements have been, in the last 16 months, have been bookings either canceled or moved forward to next year. And we've been doing that since it started. I mean, we have bookings and group bookings changed 5-6 times, even for groups. With no prospect for a return to operating on regular services anytime soon, no pay leave schedules were implemented. In addition, team members have been encouraged to take extended vacation or consider early retirement. There have also been redundancy, a few in conjunction with the merger at the end of last year. But then also quite a few staff left the tourism industry altogether. We obviously wanted to ensure that we are ready when the pandemic is over, whenever this is. This is not always easy, for many hotels and suppliers have been closed, some potentially for good. Most others have worked with reduced staffing, similar to us, and often focused on momentary opportunities that were offered. Some hotels were in the food business rather than rooms, so that has often been a challenge for us. However, the same also applied for tour operators around the world who were either closed temporarily, worked on furlough, or totally focused only on destinations that were opened and could be sold at that particular time. We used the downtime to learn a few things. Unfortunately, cutting lockdown here is not one of these things that we could learn, but we managed to get a lot of things done. Number one, we worked with reduced staffing and in different locations and doing different alternating schedules. This meant that staff members had to learn, go and work beyond their usual functions. All our countries have to look deep into our services and experience to ensure that they are up-to-date, relevant, fitting to the new normal. This includes potentially still applicable physical distancing rule as well. So any service that we offered, we had to offer according to social physical distancing rules too, which makes services a little bit more expensive. As part of the group-wide digital transformation drive, we have completed a progressive web app, so we can now deliver information paperless, showcase optional services, and give you useful tips and be in touch with clients in real time. We have also upgraded our online agent system, which makes it easier for our partners to see what products we have. And then also recognizing the importance of sustainability, the Thailand team has joined 8 other tourist countries this year to work on attaining Travel Life Partnership. And these efforts have, of course, also had an impact on the product revamp that I mentioned earlier. Now, the business opportunities. The company had actually quite a good number of domestic bookings throughout 2020 and 21 until the second wave, which made it more difficult, and the third wave close to impossible to make bookings. MICE, most international MICE arrangements quoted were either cancelled or put on hold indefinitely. Sadly, quite a few event partners have gone out of business, and many of our contacts have either been laid off or left the industry. We were lucky to be able to arrange a few domestic in-person outings in 2020. No such luck in 21. The JTB Tourist Group have started offering virtual experiences in mid-2020. We have since held many virtual meetings, cooking classes, fan trips, hotel inspections, and presentations. The Thailand team has just completed co-organizing a multi-day online symposium with attendees in 10 countries. With business opportunities at the minimum, every tourist team has been looking into ways to generate income beyond the tourism business. As a good example, the virtual run We Miss Japan was organized by JTB Thailand earlier this year. This was a fantastic learning experience for the young creators, resulting in a valuable sponsorship agreements, way over 1,000 participants, and a handsome contribution towards animal welfare. The team is now working on another healthy and charitable activity run. To make some income, the company has also exported fruits, herb, health products, and even distributed air purifier and ozonating machines. And on top of that, a close cooperation with the local winemaker was created to promote their wines, organize visits to their vineyards, and sell memberships. Perhaps due to their B2C business model, JTB Thailand has had quite a few and good number of bookings on the ASQ project. Tourists received some requests which resulted in a few bookings. Detailed information on the Phuket Sandbox scheme and the Samui Plus program were created and updated early on. We shared these with our worldwide tour operating partners and affiliates via increased newsletter frequency, by personal mails, and discussions and introductions. Our team in Phuket and Samui got CHAR certification well before the destination's opening. We have ensured that all information is available in our system. Initial government guidelines, dedicated websites, and infographics have been leading many end consumers to believe that they can only book their sandbox location via these websites. Tour operators and we, the DMC, have rather been sidelined. Feedback on Thailand's opening, however, is generally positive. We have seen that more tour operators focus on Thailand and actively promote the country now, and the same goes for Asia. Most booking requests have been made for Q1 22 onwards, especially the UK market has shown great faith in Thailand and shall remain one of our top source markets. In general, we see that the light at the end of the tunnel. We see that people no longer have to sit on suitcases and dream of traveling, but they actually can start looking into making travel arrangements and fly. It will take some time. It may start slow, but it will start.
Peter Weibel.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Peter, immediately go and get a blazer, okay? Please get a blazer, whatever you do, okay?
I decided not to wear my black shirt today, so.
Exactly.
No, it's nice to see you in blue, Peter. Suits you. Thank you so much for that. It's really insightful. We're going to move on to the banker.
The banker. I mean,
Charles
this is
Blocker. I'm sorry, I'm Charles. I was just, there's a bit of anticipation building up to your slot here, but here we are.
Charlie's got there. Next we got Samuel L. Jackson back there. You know, Charlie's a great fan of Quentin Tarantino, Pulp Fiction. What's your favorite line from Pulp Fiction, David?
Oh, something, the hamburger line.
Okay.
You know the one?
That's the Royale with cheese. But Charlie, you're there in the blazer. You're going to talk to us about the money. You know, with money, if you're a hotel owner, what the hell are you going to do? Again, we got another shitstorm with hotel owners as well. Yeah, that's it. I've cursed twice today, so that's it. Tell us about incentives with the Thai government right now for hotel owners. Over to you, Charlie.
Yeah, great.
In your blazer.
Thank you, Bill. I followed Trevor's lead there. Can everyone see my screen and see me, I guess, at the same time? Yep. Am I up? Okay. So financing tools for Thai hotel owners. This picks up on some of the key themes I think that Stefan started with from Asset World at the beginning, and is that we are in a crisis mode. And at the end of the day, I think it's those long-term partnerships that are really going to count. So these are what I'm trying to bring about is some clarity and what you need to know to use some of these tools that are available to you. So I guess we're officially in month 19 here in Thailand, and the Board of Trade, the private sector and the public sector really have been working together over the last 15 months, but particularly in the last 4 or 5 months as this protraction continues in COVID, and there's not certainty when 2019 business volume levels will come back. So the Board of Trade, which is the Thai Chamber of Commerce and the Bank of Thailand, they've gotten together and they're focused on SMEs, including the restaurants that Trevor was talking to, but about hotels. And these programs that we're going to just talk a little bit about really are, some of them are really focused on SMEs, which you can see the definitions there. Basically, $500 million revenues or less than 200 employees, because this is the backbone of the Thai economy. So I saw a number of questions coming through about, well, where are all these NPLs and what's the status? It must be just becoming a big mushroom. And the reality is it's not as bad as everyone thinks. Why? Because there's a willing and good cooperation, kicking the can down the road, if you will, to avoid NPL status. So debt restructuring is going to go on whether you're a big hotel or a small hotel, medium-sized hotel. The next two are really the asset warehousing facility and what's called a rehab or a soft loan facility. These are new programs that were introduced at the beginning of the summer. We'll go with those into some detail, but that's really where we're going to spend our time. And then just a little snapshot on another real estate capital markets product, which is a tool. It's not for everybody, but it's a REIT buyback or with a repurchase agreement. And there's been one of those issued last month quite successfully. And we'll take a quick look at that. So kind of the rules of engagement, for these two Bank of Thailand sponsored programs is, yes, you got to do a fresh new application. And there's a lot of support documentation that may seem redundant, particularly the forward-looking statements. But in doing that whole application, it does set you up for being reviewed by other credit programs, including what we'll talk more about this in a moment, the TCG, that's the Thai Credit Guarantee Corporation, which is kind of similar to if you're familiar with like the SBA loans in the United States, where there's guarantees so that banks maybe feel more comfortable. Negotiate. Recourse is still there. So in the warehousing facility, one of the things that you'll have to fight for and negotiate for is, what is my selling price if I'm going to transfer my assets over? And then ultimately, what is the formulation for repurchasing it? At the risk of stating the obvious, there is a strong preference for from the banks, from the credit underwriting community, even with the support of the Bank of Thailand, to do these schemes with owner operators who want to repurchase, as opposed to someone who just is an owner and just sells back. But there's certainly exceptions. The other thing that was interesting to me is you cannot go out and shop. If you're at BBL, if you're at KK, if you're at K-Bank, you have to stay there. You got to work it out. So that picks up on Stefan's. You got to work on the long-term relationship to tap into these financings. You cannot just switch. You have to stay. These are some of the lenders. Actually, these are the majority of the lenders that are active with, SCB, Bangkok Bank, and K-Bank, probably with the more dominant hospitality exposures. Of course, all of these banks have SME exposure. So we talked about the Bank of Thailand. It's a beautiful building. I don't know if you all have ever been there. There's lots of money down there. There's some gold bars, I'm told. But we have to remember, in this context of the bank, it is the central bank. So it's the monetary policy bank, but it's also the regulator. It's the one who comes in and looks at NPLs and is trying, or NPAs, non-performing assets as well. So they're sort of wearing two hats here, and it's very fragile because you have all these capital requirements that are coming up against banks or on banks, and they're dealing with this. So let's take a look at the asset warehousing facility. Basically, what we're talking about here is that the bank acquires the hotel asset and repays any loan in full. And then concurrently, the bank enters into an operating lease with essentially just an imputed cost of funds on that lease of exactly 1%. The bank is then match funding that. It actually registers that with the Bank of Thailand, and they're only paying, that does say 0.1% for avoidance of doubt. So I have a little illustration over here on the side that just gives kind of the hypothetical underwriting, something that might have been worth 500 million baht roughly 24 months ago has dripped down to 350 million. This isn't, according to Paul, this probably is not a Bangkok asset, but an upcountry asset. Original mortgage of 300, and they have an outstanding loan. They would probably try to structure a repurchase agreement of the sales price at least 225 million, but probably reserve some additional monies so that there can be, some working capital to move forward. So what are the key things that you need to know behind all of this? The Bank of Thailand actually, in addition to what seems like a low, it's because you are warehousing your asset at the bank, you've transferred the title over, is that the Bank of Thailand is absorbing or causing to be absorbed all of those transfer fees that every time you move an asset, we all know how expensive that is. So this is a good thing, the taxes, the stamp duties, et cetera. So it's virtually, literally no cost. I mentioned it was an operating lease for 5 years, but it's really a 3+1+1, so you don't get entangled in all of those registered lease at the land department. And then ultimately, the purchase price back would be the 1% effective cost of funds on that lease, and if there are any net operating losses. So an owner operator who then becomes just an operator is strongly encouraged, to get things going, and hopefully that's within 12 months, but it may stretch into late 2022, as mentioned by some of the other speakers. So this is the program. Now, what are the results? Well, there have been some challenges. Okay, I guess there are two or three that come up in talking to some of the promoters of this program, is that there are really a reluctance from some owners that have the higher grade assets. Either they're emotionally tied to it, maybe they don't have that diversity of revenues that Paul had talked about with regard to supporting the asset, but they still would rather just dig their heels in and use that first tool, which is restructuring. So what the banks, those banks, that panel of banks that I mentioned, they're mostly looking at some lower grade or maybe medium to lower grade assets and locations. The other logistical part of this, with Bangkok being a dark red zone, is that many of these hotels that would be candidates for this are up country. So they have to rely on the local branch. You got to get the documentation down. Some of it can be scanned. Some of it has to be original. The banks require in-person interviews. But it's just, this is just slowing the process down. It can be managed, and I think they're improving it. The last thing which I think is just sort of that uncertainty. If you transfer your asset over, say for your loan balance, plus maybe a little bit more to do some refurbishments as the property's closed, is that enough? Will I need more capital? And that just creates uncertainty because maybe there are not any other financial resources. So as of last week, there have been 65 SMEs that have drawn down under the asset warehousing facility. Most of those are actually hotels, or a large percentage of those are hotels, more than half. So the total outstandings is 10 billion, and the average loan is about 155 million. The total program is 100 billion, which is quite generous, but really only 10% of that's been used over these last 65 days. There's a lot in the pipeline. It's just when they'll come out, because this is going to drag on a while. I want to talk about the soft loan facility, which is no great shape.
Charlie, we just got a few more. Yeah. Charlie, we're running out of time, so if you can give us kind of some wrap-up points, please.
Yeah. Any rate, this one is where you're able to borrow money at essentially somewhere between 2 and 5%. Your 5-year facility, you should not pay more than 5% over 5 years. And the first 2 years can't exceed 2%, and the Bank of Thailand will subsidize the first 6 months. So I've given an example here. The take-up here has been quite strong, relatively, 37% utilization on a 250 billion facility, over 30,000 SMEs. Many of these are hotel and restaurant related. So the average loan is about $100,000 to 3.1 million. So on the REIT buyback, I think this is worth looking at. This will be on the various websites and delivered, but I think you all are familiar with Royal Orchid Sheraton on the river. They did a placement, had a valuation of about $4.5 billion. They raised capital of about $3.15 billion. One asset actually managed the place. It was really a placement, even though it's listed. Similar kinds of concepts, but what I want to draw, the most relevant thing here is if you look there on the lower left, the annual yield on that lease is 6%, and the target IRR, whether you have an option to buy back at year 3 and year 4, and then a mandatory obligation at the end of year 5, because there is an exit. They're not doing any that doesn't have that option. But look at the cost of funds. So it's a 5-year treasury. Say if you stayed in for the full 5 years, cost of funds of about 7.5% versus the asset warehousing facility, if you're an SME, at roughly 1% plus. So the other request that the Board of Trade has with the Bank of Thailand and others is like the warehousing facility. If you note here, they want to have the similar waiver or absorption of taxes, transfer fees to bring more credibility. Here these are for larger assets, marquee assets, brochure type assets, and then you need to have that credible sponsor to demonstrate that they can buy it back in years 3 through 5. Yep, that's it.
Thank you, Charlie Blocker. Thank you so much. I mean, you're working up a sweat there in that blazer. I don't know. Maybe go take a shower, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, Charlie. Great presentation. And I guess the question is, where do we go from here? Bangkok is at an intersection. It's total confusion out there right now. If you're in the hotel business, we've heard it. How do you budget? What's going to happen next? When do restaurants open? What am I going to do tomorrow? There's a lot of confusion. What we know is what we don't know. The one thing we know is you have to live to learn with COVID. We're going to have to learn to travel again with COVID. This is going to be the only way. We can't sit and do nothing. So that's the point we're stressing. We've seen the sandbox working towards that, and Thailand has to get back to business. We've got to open up Thailand again. We've got to look at the 120-day, the October reopening, and Bangkok has to be reopened because we're sitting in Phuket. It's okay to say Phuket has a sandbox, but Phuket doesn't function without Thailand. This is all part of the same market, and it's part of the same equation. So I think that's the important thing that we're ending today. We've had some great presentations. We've tried to bring you up-to-date information. And again, what we know is what we don't know. It's going to change tomorrow. It's going to change maybe in 2 minutes from now, right? David, what do we have next?
What we do have next, actually, we're gonna end on.
Oh my God! Where are we?
Don't burst out into song, Bill. No, we're going to be
what was in my coffee at lunch? I don't know.
Positive. To use one of your expressions, a game changer. It's the Russian market, the second biggest inbound market. Excuse me, Dar. The second biggest inbound market. So Sputnik's been approved. That's fantastic news. Russians are coming, and it's going to be the subject of our new of our upcoming webinar on September 9. So everyone will get the links, and please subscribe and check it out.
I'm going to bring a coat as well, right?
Maybe
I'll get like a blue blazer under my coat as well. That's going to be it. Thank you so much, C9 Hotelworks, delivering Asia communications. We'll keep bringing you this insights as much as we can, as long as we're still here, David.
Exactly. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, today.
See you next time.
Hi, my name's Ashton. I'm a creative director here at Creative Concept AV, and I'd like to show you around our digital studio. So behind me, we've got a 4K LED wall. We've got studio lights up the top here, some ambient light columns, confidence monitor on the bottom, and a 4K camera. If you come with me this way, I'll show you what's actually behind the studio. So over here, we've got Toto manning the actual stream that goes out to the internet. We've got Andrew on our video switcher, and we have Piwat on our 16-channel digital mixer to handle all the microphone and sound inputs. This is the type of studio that we use for our online events, and we actually set it up in a single day here at Sai Laguna Phuket. It's a 5-star beach resort, so at the end of the day, you could walk out the door and jump straight into a swimming pool if you wanted to. We have a sister studio in the Grand Hyatt Bali, which is a green screen studio. And for events that we've done, we've actually built studios around the region to be able to support the kind of online events that we do. That's just a little bit of insight of what we do. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, Creative Concept AV, give us a call, and maybe we'll do your next event. Thanks very much.